everybody. Today we are talking about transitology. Today is actually the day, if we were all together, it would be the day that I say I'm going to talk you guys all into communism, which is not true. I'm not going to do that at all. But I do want to talk about, one of the things we want to talk about today is we want to talk about this idea of transitioning from one system to another system. And we're going to focus especially on transitioning from one economic system to another one, which usually involves the transition from communism to capitalism, or maybe better, socialism to capitalism. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So to do that, we're going to have to understand what these two systems are. So let's get after it. First, let's start talking about this idea of transitology. It's such a weird name. I don't know that it's used all that often, but it is this thing that happened after the end of the Cold War, where there's a lot of talk about, okay, so the Soviet Union was a dictatorship. It was a communist economy or socialist economy, and now it wants to become a democracy with capitalism. So how, I get what socialism is, and I get what capitalism is. How do you move from point A to point B? And what are all the things that existed? What's the transition like? That's what transitology is. It's the process of change from one type of regime to another. And typically, there's typically two ways we talk about this. One is the political transition from authoritarianism to democracy. This is the one we actually talk about a lot more than the other kind. At the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union basically collapsed, we talked a lot about the economic. The one we talk about a lot more today is the political, where we have a case like a dictatorship, let's say, in like Zimbabwe in Africa. And how do we move from a dictatorship to a real, true democracy? What does that look like? And how, like, again, I get what it looks like in point A, I get what it looks like in point B, but the transition's a real tricky thing. Like, how do you get there? So the other is, of course, economic. And socialism, when I say socialism here, I am not talking about sort of how America talks about socialism. We got this weird version of socialism we've made up. It's not socialism at all, but that's fine. Call it whatever you want. This is like I guess you could say, real socialism, in the sense of the Soviet Union was never a communist economy. It was always a socialist economy. Socialism is essentially the transition from sort of capitalism to communism, in the Marxist way of thinking about it, which is just a fancy way of saying in communism there isn't a state at all. So we have never had a communist economy. We have had economies that have tried to move towards communism, which is socialism. That's the idea. Now, again, that is not the U.S. version of socialism, at least the way it's used in the media. So just leave that aside for now. Transitology really involves a conversation about the change in the basic rules of the game. So let's say that I had a basketball team, and this basketball team could shoot baskets like crazy. So they're constantly scoring points. They did really well, blah, blah, blah. So let's say that the next year they changed the rules so that the way that you actually score points in a basketball game is by stealing the ball from the other team. That's where you get the points. All of a sudden, my team that was really successful under the old system is not very successful under the new system. So in other words, there's how does the process go from this old system where the rules were X to this new system where the rules are Y? Why do we get this particular set of rules? These are all the questions that sort of go on with it. It's one thing to sort of work within a certain set of rules, but if the rules change, then what? And that's why transitology is so different. If the rules change, then what? The previous winners are going to be resistant to change. My basketball team is not going to want to change these rules at all. In fact, we're going to use all the power, political, economic, cultural, whatever power I have, I'm going to use to make sure the rules don't change. Because I'm a winner under this old system. Why would I want a new system? And then the brief window of opportunity to take advantage of these changing rules. Let me go back to this one right here, just really quick. So the people who have the power are going to be the winners in the old system. So the people who have the power are going to be the most resistant to any change that comes along. If change is somehow inevitable for whatever reason, then these potential winners, or these previous winners, are going to use all of their power and influence to influence the next set of rules so that they still have the advantage. They're not going to just say, oh, everything's changing, well, I guess I'm a loser now. No, they're going to do everything they can to either stop the change or to change the change in such a way that they are still the successors. That's why transitology is so important. Dictators rarely just sort of step down and say, you know what, I guess I'm done. They're either sort of forcibly removed or they influence the rules so much so that they get to still retain power in the next system that comes along. And that's why this is such an important thing to talk about. It's not just, I want to become a democracy. A thing we call democratization, for example. Such a long word, it's going to take me forever to write there. Democratization, it's also the process thereof. How do you get to that point? All right. So what we're going to talk about the economics though today, because we're talking about the Soviet Union moving into Russia. And we got two questions. We got two big questions, economic questions, and these are going to be the changing answers to these questions are going to be the big things that are happening in the Soviet Union. The first question is who determines the prices, and the second question is who owns the means of production. Okay, so when I come back, I'm going to talk about who determines the prices.